just let everybody come in here. There's a few old suspects. You can see some faces here, Bobby. Maybe looking a little bit older.
Do I see Craig Brown there?
Yes.
Once he's put another 50 pence in the meter, Bobby, for his internet.
Okay. Oh, there's Bruni.
You did. You did.
And there's also a young Tommy Wilson there as well.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, they're all coming out the woodwork here, Bobby.
Oh, Tommy goes back a long way.
Oh, geez.
He used to come over to the Dartmouth camps. He used to come to the Dartmouth camps.
Hey, Bobby, the Vogel Singer camps before that.
The Vogel, that was even before. I'm trying to forget the Vogel Singer camps. The soccer nastics in the morning.
Oh,
I don't think Tam ever got to the soccer nastics in the morning.
No, I was just coming in from the night out the night before.
Craig would have been. He would have loved the soccer nastics, I think.
Oh, jeez.
He would have loved the night out before.
Bobby, I hope you're going to tell us when you played for Clyde.
Well, that was the most important one. I can.
The highlight of your career.
Yeah, I can. Well, I think Eric's heard me reciting the Clyde teams before that won the cup.
First time I met Bobby 24 years ago, Craig. First time I met Bobby in Baltimore, he was over doing a clinic and we had lunch, and it was one of those lunches, and it turned into a 2.5-hour lunch. And I distinctly remember that he recited the starting 11 for the Clyde Scottish Cup winning team from 1957.
55 and 50. Don't get it right. Come on, Eric. Get it. Tommy's dad played for the Clyde.
Oh, that was a few years ago.
Yeah, that was a few years ago. Yeah,
I remember that. I remember him as well. So there you go. No, it was Hewkins, Murphy, Haddock, Granville, Anderson, Lang, Divers, Robertson, Hill. No, it's Divers. It was Divers. Who was Divers? I was Robertson, and it was Hill, Brown, and Ring. It was Brown and Ring. That was 55.
Sounds a good team.
It was a good team. Beat Aberdeen in a replay in the semi-final, and they beat Celtic in a replay in the final. Tommy Ring scored. I was at both the finals, but my dad wouldn't let me take the afternoon off school for the Aberdeen game, because there's no floodlights in these days. So
that team would win the league just now.
What?
Did you go via mine?
Do you think of Clyde then? I mean, Clyde had, Albert Murphy was, era, he played for Ireland, and then Harry Haddock was a full international. Granville was an Ireland. I think he'd played for Ireland, and then obviously Archie Roberts and Tommy Ring, they'd all played.
Yeah, good team.
Imagine Clyde having all these internationals, current, playing.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm repeating it. If they were in the league just now, they'd win it. That team.
Yeah, no, they possibly would.
They won the Premier League.
Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll get kicked off here, and thanks so much to everybody getting out their beds very early on a Friday morning. Some of you who are on the West Coast, super delighted to obviously have Bobby Clark. Many of you have been very much looking forward to this one, as have I, and just an amazing journey, an amazing story, and kicking off in the west of Scotland. So Kingy's going to jump into the early days, and then I'll jump in after that from the coaching career and the journey afterwards. So Kingy, you've got the floor, my friend.
Thanks, Eric. I'm just looking back, Bobby, to start when I was doing some research. 1962, I think. Started out at Queen's Park. Well, I'm sure you're pretty interested to see them dipping their toes in the professional ranks now, but obviously amateur back in your day. What's your memories of back then when you started out at Queen's Park?
That was, yes, I remember my first game was at Brechin. And it would be, I think it was, they used to play 2 games, you know, January 1st and the January 2nd. They played 2 games over New Year. And I'd watched on January 1, I'd been just in the stand at Hampden. I think they lost to Dumbarton. And then after the game, I was told, you're coming up to Brechin.
To the hedge.
The next day, you know.
Yeah.
So I got on the train at Buchanan Street and went up with the team. And then the team was read out. I was in goals at Brechin. It was a snow-covered pitch. I don't think anyone else wanted to play. I think I was the only one that was excited to play. But that was it. That was where it all started. And I played the rest of that year. I played all the games around that year. And it was very exciting at that. It was great because there was some great people around there. Bert Cromer, Junior Romand, and people like that were real old stalwarts. Billy Neal, you know, there was some great old professionals around Queen's Park at that time. And it was just a great club. And it even get better when Eddie Turnbull joined in my second year there. Because Eddie just, the whole thing, it just completely changed, you know.
Quite astonishing when you look through it. I mean, even when you look at the current national team who obviously play on Saturday, and Andy Robertson started there at Queen's Park.
Yeah.
You know, and even all these years on, it's still becoming a proving ground for real class players to come through.
No, it was a great. I had sort of come through. Football was always my love, you know, and I played for Glasgow East. We won the Scottish Cup, Glasgow East. We had Alec Willoughby was in that team, and it was a great team. And then East Bank, I went to East Bank, and we won all the 3 cups. We won the league, and the other 2 cups were in. And so I loved. Then the next thing, my parents didn't see soccer, football maybe as a big thing, and they made me sit the exam for Glasgow High School. And because I went to Glasgow High School, I had to play rugby. And I actually liked rugby. So, you know, I did. I believe it or not, I really liked rugby. I didn't want to, you know, I kicked against it pretty hard, to be honest. But anyway, I ended up playing rugby in the morning, and we had a wee team called Sandy Hills Amateurs. In the afternoon, Mr. Jimison and Mr. Hardy took it. You know, they were great men, and it was a great start. But the one thing that it did, when you were at the high school, Queen's Park actually asked all the rugby schools if there's anyone. They asked the head of PE, was there anyone really interested in football, to send them in for a trial, and I ended up getting into on a Monday night. So I'd go every Monday night to Hampden. There's another wee goalkeeper called Sandy McElwham, who played for Nielsen Juniors and played for Scotland Juniors, actually. So Sandy and I were the 2 goalies with the schoolboy, and that's where it began. Then I ended up leaving Sandy Hills. I went to the Queen's Park, had the Victoria 11, and then the Hampden 11. Tommy Wilson, he'll know all these, and then the Strollers. Yeah. And then I got in the first team. I was still at school then. Yeah. So I could only play rugby once. I was in the first 15 in my 5th year, and then I had to make a decision, you know, and I ended up just playing football, and football was my love.
Happily, you stopped the egg chasing and got into the real game.
Yes, got into the real game.
I was looking at your time at Aberdeen, like when the start at Aberdeen, and then you look through all the, obviously we'll come on to all the highlights at Aberdeen, but there's one thing that I must admit I never knew, and I said to Eric before we come on, you actually played some games outfield for Aberdeen, is that correct?
Well, I was outfield. You've got to be careful what you say.
What position did you play?
I was a centre back. I think it was good at heading the ball. You know, in fact, I remember at Eddie. They used to play as a warm-up game. In these days, I mean, I think we've all played it. Throw, head, catch.
Yeah. Yep.
And of course, Ernie McGarr. See, I'd lost my place in the first team to Ernie McGarr. The team had gone through a bad spell, and I was maybe contributed to that. You know, I don't know. But anyway, I was playing the reserves, and it was at the start of a season, and I'd hurt my wrist, so I couldn't play. And we were playing at Shawfield, would you believe? The first team was at Pataudry. And these days, the second team then played at Shawfield. And they were looking for, they needed, Martin Buchan had broken his ankle in a car crash. I think Tam McMillan was injured. So they said there's nobody for the second team as a centre back. So Teddy Scott, he knew, because I used to go in, when if the first team got a Monday off, the reserves were in, I used to always go in and play outfield just with the reserves, you know. And Teddy says, well, I think he said to Eddie, I'd rather just take Bobby than get a trialist. So my first game was playing Shawfield. I remember I got the ball right at the beginning of the game, and everybody was thinking I was going to pass it, you know. And suddenly I found myself in the edge of the 18-yard line. I said, what the hell do I do now, you know? So that was it. But I enjoyed it, believe it or not. I remember beating Celtic at Parkhead when I was playing centre back, and Kerry Dalglish, Lou McCarry were there, you know. Oh. So it was, and then I ended up playing the first team. I think they were still struggling for centre backs, and I played a game at Love Street. It was a friendly game, and I played a game at St Johnstone, you know. So it was, but I think I remember anyway what happened not long after. Ernie was actually playing it when I lost my place in the first year. Ernie actually played so well, he was in the Scottish squad. Mm-hmm. So in these days, if you had to have about 3 players for your midweek game to be cancelled. Mm-hmm. So we're playing at Love Street, and Ernie was actually playing that night, was playing in Austria, you know, for Scotland. Yeah. And I was back in goals for the first team. And then I remember after the game, I played quite well. And Eddie in his lovely way of saying it, he says, you're a so-and-so goalkeeper. Just remember that from now on. So, and he qualified that a little bit as only Eddie could, you know. So they never gave me another shot at it. So, and then I wasn't long. I get back in the first team, and yeah, things kind of went a wee bit better. It was good to start with. It was just, you know, when a team goes through a bad, it's a little bit like Aberdeen just now. Mm-hmm. You know, they dropped Big Joe last week. They put Big Joe Lewis. Joe Lewis, a good goalkeeper, I think. Mm-hmm. He's maybe not too comfortable with the ball at his feet. You know, I think that's changed him. I think he'd be better just knocking it up the field. You know, some goalkeepers are, you know, like the Liverpool lad and, you know, Man City lad.
Different game, yeah.
Yeah, I don't even think, you know, Hart, he was with Celtic.
No, he's not. No, exactly.
He doesn't look over comfortable with it. So you've got that. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see if Big Joe's lost his place for good, or if
that was a one-off.
Yeah, it's a one-off. Maybe just to get him out. I think Eddie just thought he would take me out, you know, for a couple of games. But to be fair to Ernie was superb. Mm-hmm. Ernie McGarr was a good goalie. You know, he was a very, very good goalkeeper, and you know, he eventually, well, when I get back, I think he went to Dunfermline, had a good career there. I think Ernie was still playing when he was about 40.
Yeah, that's right. I remember
with Airdrie. No, Ernie was a good goalie.
Yeah. So, looking at that, I looked a bit at just how young you were when you made the first step to go to the States, which would obviously become a big part of your life in coaching terms. I think you went when you were something like 22 to Washington Whips. Wonderfully named Washington Whips. And
Washington Whips.
Yeah. What's your memories of that? Did that sow a seed in your head?
Well, that was the whole Aberdeen team. That was the whole Aberdeen team did that.
Oh, really? Right.
So Aberdeen became the Washington Whips.
Wow.
And it was when they started professional football in America, they took teams over. I mean, we were playing Cagliari were Chicago, you know, Wolverhampton Wanderers were Los Angeles, Sunderland were Vancouver, Hibs were Toronto, Cerro of Uruguay, they were New York. You know, I mean, go through the whole team. Ado Den Haag was San Francisco, and we won. There was the Western group, and we won our section and ended up playing. They tossed for the venue for the final, and we had to go to Los Angeles, and it was a great final. It was an amazing final. It was.
Who did you play in the final, Bobby?
We played Wolves. That's what I say. We
Wolves,
played
yeah.
Wolves, Los Angeles Wolves, they called them.
Oh, wow.
And we lost Jimmy Smith, Jinky Smith, who was a very, very good player. I don't know if you remember. He was one of the first £100,000 players to go south of the border. He and Tommy Craig went in the same week. Tommy went to Sheffield, I think Wednesday, and Jimmy went to Newcastle. But anyway, Jimmy gets sent off 20 minutes into the game. And you're playing, and it's quite warm down in Los Angeles. There's a good crowd. I remember there's about 17,000, 18,000 at the game. Yeah. And we were playing the rest of the game. We ended up 4-4 after regulation. We'd been playing with 10 men. And then it went into the next 2 periods of overtime, a half hour. It was 5-5. And then we finally lost. It was an own goal. Ali Shewan scored an own goal. We lost 6-5 in the final. But that was my first trip to America. Yeah. And it was great for all the boys. I mean, we had a lot of young boys, Martin Buchan, Ian Taylor. There's a lot of quite young players. Franny Monroe, big Francis Monroe was a really good player, went to Wolves. I think Francis is no longer with us, but we had a good team. Jim Story, go right through, David Johns, Harry Melrose. That was a year, because we'd got to the final that year. We'd lost in the final to Celtic. It was the only time Celtic beat us that year, and that's the year they won the European Cup. It was we lost 2-0. And Eddie, the big thing with that final was Eddie took ill, and Eddie couldn't come into the final. He couldn't come, so we turned up honestly at 25-3 for a 3 o'clock kickoff. Because seemingly Eddie had said he was in his bed, he decided he couldn't go. The doctor said, you can't go. And then the whole team had to go up to his room. Now, I wasn't there, I was a part-timer, because I was still at Jordan Hill. So I'd gone on the blue train. These days, you get the blue train at Shettleston into Queen Street, and then I get the train out to Mount Florida, And I'm there I'd be there about quarter to 2. There's nobody there, and all the Celtic boys are buzzing. We're in the home dressing room, and I'm sort of peeping out the door, and I didn't want to go on the field, You're on your own. I said, have I got the right day, And then they turn up, and it was a shambles. We didn't start playing till the last 20 minutes. It was poor Davy Shaw. If Eddie had been there, Eddie would have got a grip of the thing. But I mean, it wasn't Davy's fault. He wasn't ready for it. And we lost 2-0. We're 2-0 down, and that was Willie Wallace scored 2 goals. So that's it.
Unbelievable. Not unlike preparation for games these days. When you look at that kind of like back on those days in Aberdeen, we'll come to Fergie in a minute, and obviously I think Eric will cover Fergie a lot in the coaching part of it, Bobby. But when you look at the figures, I think only you're in the Hall of Fame, obviously. Only Miller and McLeish have got more games for Aberdeen. I mean, those kind of stats, you must look back on that with a lot of pride and on the career that you ended up having at Aberdeen.
No, I was lucky. No, I mean, you up until at the very end, I only missed one game, the last game, when we won the league in '80, and that was with my back. So I'd hurt my back, and then I had to get surgery, and then I suppose by the time I came back, Jim Layton was in goals, and Big Brian Gunn was the under-21 goalie. Jim was in the national team. I think I was past my sell-by date, but I would be 37, and they would be. They're good. They're good guys. So it's a great club, Aberdeen. And as I say, I was really lucky. If I think back through right from when I went there in '65, right through, and then what was real fun at the end was my last 5 years at Aberdeen. A lad Lenny Taylor and I ran the youth program. In fact, we really started it. It was actually Billy started it, and Billy was only there for a year. But Billy got Lenny and I to get involved, and then obviously Alec came and carried it on, and that was great because I had 5 years. Then you had a lot of the young boys, Neil Simpson, Johnny Hewitt, Eric Black and Brian Gunn came through via that way, and big Willie Faulkner. Who else was there? There was a few other, Brian Mitchell. There was a few other boys that came. Johnny Hewitt, obviously, as well. So both the guys that scored goals sort of came through. But that was a great experience. That was the final bit. That sort of prepared me, I think, quite well for
coaching.
For a career coaching. You know, that 5 years. And it used, because we used to play it'd be a Wednesday night. We'd always, sorry, it was a Thursday night. We'd always have a game in the car park. You think all the nice fields they have now. If you've ever been to Pittodrie, you'll see it's a red blaze car park.
Absolutely.
And it's not even square. It's a different shapes. And the lights were really just car parking lights. They were, in these days, they weren't what you call floodlights. They were car. But we would have, there was no floodlit places around Aberdeen in these days. So that's what we did. We would, our under 15 squad would always invite an under 16 local team to come down and play us. And there was two wee sort of dugout things. I don't think they were really dug. I don't know what they were. They were this little sort of, I don't know what they were made of, corrugated iron or something. And there was just room for three in it, so there'd usually be Lenny at one side, me at the other side, and Fergie always sat through the first half. And old Teddy Scott, Teddy was a reserve team lad. Teddy would usually, because he was always going in to put on baths or fold towels. Teddy did every job at Pittodrie, and he would always be leading on it. But it was really, that was an education, just listening and all the folk talking about the play, trying to identify, obviously, how they were playing, but also who we should be looking at, and who
which one they could take.
So that was good knowledge for me, and it was done well. So, and Lenny did a great job. Lenny was a teacher. He'd played in the Highland League, Lenny, and but he was a teacher. He was a headmaster eventually at the secondary school in Aberdeen, and so it was good. That was where it all. Great memories of Aberdeen. Some great players. We made a hell of a team in the 70 team that won the Scottish Cup, and then the next year, I thought that was. I always feel that the stand burned down, and I felt that really upset our run towards that, because when the stand burned down, the pitch really dried out. When the wind blew, it would blow through. When the stand was there, it didn't really dry the field out the same way as it did. And anyway, we lost the league in the last game of the season. We lost to Falkirk, penalty kick, 1-0, and Celtic won the league. That was a good team. Martin Buchan, Tam McMillan, Henning Bowl, Jim Hermiston, all great back four.
That must have made 1980 for you like a lot sweeter then, if you've been through that. And I think principally a lot of people like of my era will remember the 1985 triumph, because it's the last one since the Old Firm domination, if you know what I mean. But tell us a little bit about 1980 and winning the league, and A, how much that meant to you, and B, you're probably seeing the start of Sir Alex kind of rise there, aren't you? 3 years later, he's beaten Real Madrid, but at that point, you're in on the, maybe one of his greatest titles.
Yeah, no, I think that was a very important. We'd lost the league in the last game of the season also to Billy McNeil. It was to Rangers that time. We lost. We drew at Easter Road, and they beat Motherwell. I think it was. I think so. I'm not sure on that. But anyway, then the next year was Fergie's first year, and I was actually out. I'd broken my thumb in a pre-season friendly against Spurs. Big Lacey, the big centre half. I was punching the ball, and I half caught his head. He had a sore head, and I had a sore thumb. But anyway, I missed the early games. But the time I came, I remember the team, a lot of the guys, I think Alec had upset, and I wasn't there because I got to know Alec more through at the beginning, through the youth, the coaching. But I think some of the boys found it difficult because he kept coming back talking about this great St Mirren team, folk like Tommy Wilson. He was talking. I was talking about all the good players that he had, and he had a good. I mean, he had a great team. He'd done a fabulous job with St. Mirren. And anyway, it took a wee while to say. So his first year was okay, it was coming. And then that next year, the second year, we did really well in the League Cup. If you remember, we beat Rangers home and away, because in these days you played home and away in the League Cup. Then we played Celtic home and away. We beat them home and away. And then we beat Morton, who were really going well that year. They were way up high in the league. And then we got Dundee United in the final. And we should have beaten Dundee United, but it ended up 0-0. And that was at Hampden. And we played them the replay at Dens Park and got absolutely done 3-0. We just never started that night. So you're thinking, there it is again, you know?
Yeah.
And you're always just going to be second. And even then, I remember coming back thinking, we were, I think, 11 points behind, and it was 2 points for a win in these days. I think we're 11 points behind them, and I think we had about 11 games to go, and we only had 2 home. If you look at the fixtures, we only had 2 home games, so we had nine on the road, twice at Parkhead. So we had 2 at Parkhead and one at Ibrox. You know, so you're thinking that's a tall order, and then we just kept just one at a time,
picking them off.
I remember after the Dundee United game when we lost in the replay, the final of the League Cup. I remember coming back that morning, and Alec was in a sour mood, obviously after the game. You know, he wasn't happy at all. But see, that morning he was right in there, and he was clapping everybody, getting everybody going, come on, we're not finished, we're still going. And he hadn't given up for sure. And of course, we just one game at a time. He just kept coming. And for me, it was a tough time. You know, I remember I think it was around the 15th of March. I remember coming in after the Dundee United game. The club secretary told me my father-in-law had died. You know. So that was so we just to leave it and go straight up. I just got in the car, went up to he lived in Golspie. So we'd go up with the funeral there. I just get back from the funeral. We played Dundee, we won that game. And 2 weeks later, it was my own father that died, you know. Yeah. So that was both our fathers passed. So and Fergie was great. I used to go in and train at Shawfield. You know, he just said, stay there and just go in and train in Glasgow. Stay with your mum for a wee bit. Anytime you want, just stay with your mum if you feel you should be in Glasgow. And Alec was great through that time. Yeah. Alec and Pat Stanton were at the funeral. I remember them being at the funeral. And he was great. And we just, it all worked. I think they must have been up there pulling some strings for us.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a good team. That was a good team. I mean, Big Alec and Willie, it was a really good. Stuart Kennedy was a terrific fullback. Big Boogie. Yeah, no, it was good.
That's a back four. That when you talk about back fives as a coach now, that's pretty decent. If you go Clark, Kennedy, McLeish, Miller, Rugby,
good team.
That's a pretty good back five.
And we lost Wee Joe. Wee Joe had torn in the League Cup second game at Parkhead. Wee Joe had torn his ACL, so we hadn't Joe really for a lot of that season after certainly the second half, and that's when Mark McGee and Stevie Archibald came into their own. We stole Stevie Archibald, Craig.
I know you stole it. And there were no ads on.
There's no add-ons these days.
No add-ons.
25,000. Then you sold them at Aberdeen for 800,000, and then Tottenham sold it for 1.2 million, and there were no add-ons.
No add-ons. So there you go. It's a killer.
No, that could have been Clyde. When you think about it, that was unbelievable. No, he was so Stevie and Mark. They were great. You had, of course, Wee Gordon was in that little half space all the time, and we actually had Scan. We hadn't Peter Weir at that time. Peter he came the next year. Peter was a great player. But Stan did a really good job. Ian Scanlon was he was excellent. Yeah, he was the left wing, and as I say, Drew Drew was a sort of attacking midfield, but Drew Jarvie was a good player.
Yeah.
He was just a really workmanlike, tough player, you know. So no, it was very, very, very good. Though,
if that was a highlight at Aberdeen, Bobby, you had 17 caps for Scotland. When you look back at that, what would be your? This is an international week. We're obviously all building up towards Saturday, and I think we've played Israel 157 times now in the last 3 years, but we're all building up for it anyway. But what was your best memories with Scotland?
I think the time, I would say, I felt we were going someplace. We had ups and downs. I mean, we had some good games, and I think that the best was when Tommy Dock was there.
Yep.
You know, that was a time maybe I played in most of the games, and I was involved in most of the games there. I remember we went to the home internationals, and I played in all the games there. And I think we shared the championship. I think we lost to England 1-0. We beat Ireland. We beat Wales, and then we went to Brazil for their Independence Cup. And that was a really good. That was good for the team. Played Yugoslavia, Czech. I didn't play the Yugoslavia. Ali Hunter played against Yugoslavia, then I played against Czechoslovakia and Brazil. Playing Brazil in the Maracanã
can't be that. That's unbelievable.
That was, and we were unlucky. Well, honestly, we lost a goal about, I don't know, maybe 7 minutes, 5, 6, 7. It seemed it was very near the end. Mm-hmm. Revolino crossed it, and Gersino with a diving header scored. I mean,
if you're going to get beaten, you might as well get beaten by Reto.
So that I always thought that was it, and it was about 130,000 in the Maracanã. So that was a special. That was trip.
Yeah.
And then obviously we came back, and then we played Denmark in the World Cup, beat them 4-1 in Copenhagen. That was good. Then the Doc, he sort of gave it up. He went down to Man United, so you could hardly blame him for that. So
no, exactly.
The Doc was a character, you know. The first game he played, it was actually Bob Wilson that played in his first game. It was against Portugal. And I remember he did the team talk, and he had the grapes, you know, and he had the green grapes and the black grapes. And he goes, and he looks at them, but he says, they better be Portugal. You know, he did the black grapes. That was the Doc. I don't know if that's allowed nowadays, you know.
No, possibly not.
The Doc's no longer, so he's no longer with us, so we can see that. But it was one of these. It was typical Tommy Doc. He was always he was a funny man. But it was good.
Maracanã is a magnificent stadium and all that, but as Bryn would say, I mean, we've got to get to the highlight of your career, which was obviously playing at a far more salubrious stadium than the Maracanã at Shawfield. So tell us about you finally get to play at the Theatre of Dreams, Shawfield. I think later on in your career, like obviously you played there for other teams, but you get to play there for your boyhood heroes. And I think your dad was chairman at Clyde at one point as well.
It was, but yes, unfortunately
so,
he wasn't there. So I'm glad he
wasn't.
I didn't play well all the time.
Actually playing a game for Clyde must have been that's one of them. It's one of them. You've got to fulfill that, I guess. It's on the bucket list.
It was special because I was Clyde daft. You know, I told you. I
think you've got to be daft to be a Clyde fan. Have you not? Is it not going to the water?
The bully way, and my brother, he was at Airdrie last week. You know, George. My brother still. He's a season ticket. He has a season ticket for Clyde. So. No, Clyde was special. I think it's a romantic time in your football life, and I think my romantic time was, you know, maybe about 7, 8, 9, 10, you know, and that was when and my dad was actually, believe it or not, at that time playing golf on a Saturday. He worked on a Saturday morning, and he usually had a group of guys that he would play golf with on a Saturday afternoon. And it was this man, and I was just, because my dad had a trial for Clyde, you know. My dad played with Bridgeton Waverley, And I was just, because your dad had played, you know, the East End of Glasgow, football was really important. It was very, very important. So anyway, I always wanted to go to a game, and you get this man, Mr. Tommy Docherty, used to come and pick me up and take me to the Clyde games. And then Tommy Docherty, it wasn't the Tommy Docherty, it was another Tommy Docherty. But Tommy couldn't go because his father was in hospital. And these days, the only visiting time was like a Saturday afternoon and things like that. Yeah. So he couldn't go. So I started going myself, you know, I would usually get a tram into Parkhead, and I'd walk to Shawfield, you know. And my mother says, that boy can't be going at 9 years old, going in there. You've got. So my dad stopped playing golf and started going back to the football. Mm-hmm. And he worked for Dunn's. Willie Dunn, of course, was the chairman of Clyde at that time. And anyway, that was how I came. We all get my dad. I don't know if it was good. He might be better still playing golf.
What was your one game like? What do you remember of your game when you?
I played more than one game. Unfortunately, the first game was at Queen's Park.
Yep.
And I think we drew 0-0 or maybe 1-1.
Yeah.
We didn't lose. I played a couple of decent games. I played a couple. I wasn't very good, but I played. I remember it was good because my kids didn't get to see me play, and we're playing at Tynecastle, and I think we lost, Craig. But I said to Craig, "Well, this is good because it was a League Cup game."
I keep telling everyone it was a clean sheet you had at Tynecastle.
maybe I can't remember. I remember you said at the end, because my youngest had never seen me play, and he said, well, at least he saw you playing a good game, you know, and that was the game. So anyway, I think it was 5 or maybe more games, but I really enjoyed it, and Craig was great. I think I said to Craig, I don't know if I've helped you or hindered you, but I've enjoyed it. So
I think a big influence in the dressing room. You can imagine, Ian. Yeah. Bobby Clark comes into the dressing room and all the young players. I mean, they were in awe of him, and rightly so. Yeah. Because he had this wonderful career with Aberdeen and with the national team. So it was a big boost to get him to come out and play a few games. I mean, you had been retired. And I think I'd been coaching in America over the summer, and I came back, and I was pretty fit because I was at Vogelsinger's camps. Tommy Wilson was, and I used to do these exercises in the morning, and then when you're coaching there, you were doing a lot of demonstrations and stuff, so you were playing quite a lot. We'd always have little games, you know, after coaching at the end of the afternoon session. We usually had a game, so I was fit physically, you know. But it's like funny. I was talking about the Aberdeen boy that played last week. You know, he suddenly came in, and I just wonder how many games, because there's no reserve league now.
No, that's right. Yeah. Yep.
You know, when you're out the team, you're sitting in the first team bench, and that's. I thought it was much better back in the day when if you weren't playing. The time I lost my place, Ernie was in the first team, I was in the second team, so I'm playing every week. Yeah, exactly. and it's not. You can do stuff in training, diving, and all that stuff, but it's all decisions and stuff. And I just thought that must have been a hard game for that lad to
Gary
come
Woods.
into.
Yep.
Gary Woods, he came in and. He didn't get many saves to make, to be honest. So it wasn't his fault, you know. We lost bad goals, but I don't think it was a goalkeeper. It certainly wasn't Gary's fault.
Bobby, that's been going over the playing career with you has been an absolute privilege. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Brought a lot of names out that I'd forgotten.
I'm going to pass you on.
Clyde had some good players at that time, because the wee winger that went to Chelsea,
Pat Nevin,
Pat Nevin, and then the left back Tommy
McQueen.
Tommy McQueen. No, there was a player. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they both had good, you know, they went on and had good careers. No, but it was different because what I remember, I've been spoiled playing behind Miller, McLeish, you know, Stuart Kennedy and
Big Dougie.
Yeah,
it was a bit different.
I actually had one more game
Go on.
For Forest Mechanics.
Forest Mechanics, I did see that. Forest
in
Mechanics.
a cup final. I came back from America and I got a phone call. And it was, what was it? Harry McFadden was the manager.
There you go.
Harry says, he says, we're in a cup final and my goalie's injured. I've not got a goalie. All I've got is a 17-year-old boy. And I saw you were back from America. Would you play? And I said, oh, I'm 40 by now. I said, no, I don't think so. And I came off the phone and I told my wife, and she says, would you like to play? I said, yeah, I'd love to play, but I don't want to let them down. I've not played a game for She says, he's got nobody else. Go and tell him. So I went back on the phone and I called him. I said, yeah, I'll play for you. And then I called Alec, called Fergie. I said, can I come in and train? I told him that he said, yes, come in and train. And I came in and trained with Aberdeen all week. I went out and played. We won 1-0.
Oh,
that's my quick. And I get 2 offers. Bertie Auld offered us to come to Easter Road, and Ali McLeod offered me to come to Broomfield.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I've done this. I did this for Clyde. That was for a special reason.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
said, I think I know when it's time. But it was fun.
I think
funny because I worked Forest is just along the road from where I am now,
Yeah.
And I go to Forest, and I was playing in they have a fundraiser golf thing the other week there, and it was actually Lenny Taylor's. We had teams of 4, my neighbour, me, Big Jim Layton, Big Jim, and it was this boy Scott Taylor, who was Lenny Taylor's son. Yeah. Who's a good friend too. So anyway,
great memories. I think,
Bobby, just to jump into that, perfect timing. Small world that we've got. So one of our guys on here, Scott McLeod, is actually from Forest, and he was at that game. And he lives in Eden Prairie. He lives in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. And he sent me a message this week, and he said, I remember Bobby playing for my local team, Forest Mechanics. And he's on here today. Scott, do you want to say a few words about Bobby's performance that day?
Yeah, Bobby. I'm one of the few chookers out of the group here. So I used to play for Forest myself back in the 90s, but back then in the 80s, I was a ball boy for Forest, and I remember that cup final well. Derek Harris was the keeper, and I was about 10 years old. They took us through in the bus to the game at Borough Briggs, and from what I remember, you had a great game. You kept the clean sheet, and I remember the Bucky Thistle fans were a bit pissed off about the whole situation, I think, when we had a Scotland legend win the cup for us. So not bad, one game in the Highland League. Most of us played there and didn't win a single trophy, and you did one day and won the cup in one day. So well done.
I'll tell you, it was hilarious, Scott, because I remember the first time I got the ball, this wee guy comes jumping up and down in front of me. And I suddenly, I says, Windies, behave yourself. Windies was George Stevens. He used to have these big glasses, and all the guys, he was in our, Lenny and the coaching school at Pittodrie. Yes, he was playing for, he was a forward for Bucky, wee guy George Stevens. So I always remember that. And I called him Windies, and he started to laugh, and I laughed, and he was up quite aggressively, he realised that I knew who he was. I knew where he lived, so I'd be around there to. Anyway.
That's the small football world we live in, Bobby. Scott had mentioned that to me this week, and he was at the game. So there you go. Bobby, we're going to jump onto the coaching career a little bit here, and I wanted to flip you over to, and we'll talk about that picture in a minute, but I wanted to flip you over to Tommy. First of all, Tommy's obviously, when we heard that yourself was coming on, Tommy's got a long history with yourself. Tommy, do you want to talk about the early days? And I know that, we talked about this earlier, the Queen's Park connection. Tommy's obviously a Queen's Park lad as well. And the early days of your experiences, obviously, you and I talked about this the other day, Tommy, is you might not be here today if it wasn't for Bobby Clark.
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely right. And what I'd forgotten about Bobby is his unbelievable memory for details and people and events. Bobby, I made my debut for Queen's Park against Brecon as well. So there's another coincidence. I remember the hedge. So I went over to America when I was still playing. Campbell Murray and I went over. Bobby will remember this. I went over, had a week in Austin in Texas and 3 weeks in Santa Barbara. I think that brought me here more than Bobby Clark, to be fair. I thought the whole country was like Santa Barbara. Unfortunately, it's not. But I think what I learned from Bobby was I thought I knew a little bit about coaching. And I think what I could do was put on a decent training session then. I think with Bobby, he taught me the link between training, coaching and teaching. And, he was unbelievably organised. Even in the camps, when you would think that people would just go through the motions because you were starting at 6 a.m. and you were finishing at 8, 9 o'clock at night. And Bobby would have these coaches meetings in the evening. And it was only later in life that I worked this out that, at 8 o'clock, us foreigners were desperate to get the racing colours on and go out at night. And Bobby would have us in these 2-hour-long coaching meetings talking about the next day's training session, which we knew because he'd organised them all. So you think the meeting's over and you're just going out the door away to get ready to go out for a beer. And Bobby would say, "Hey, Tam, so tell me about that 4v2 again." And everybody was like, "Oh no, you couldn't get out the room." But I just remember that it really opened my eyes to what coaching actually was, and the responsibility you have as a coach. That you're much more. And Craig, to be fair, I'm really privileged to be on the call with Craig, who taught me a hell of a lot as well about standards and that you're actually teaching people. You're not young players. You're not coaching them. Bobby we were also legendary with the 5-a-side teams that we had.
Never lost.
We never lost. We played against all these former players for Liverpool and Real Madrid that had knee injuries and ended up in America. And we never lost. We never lost a game to this day.
No. We used to play every night after the afternoon practice. Never lost. Yeah, well, that was a highlight, I think, mind you. That was a highlight. No, we good teams. Yeah, with good teams.
Brilliant days, Tommy. Let's on that point. Obviously, it's a delight to have Craig Brown here with us as well. And one thing that always stands out to me, Bobby, is that you always class yourself as a teacher, and you look back in your early days at Jordan Hill College so fondly, and you think of everybody else that came through the Jordan Hill. The Jordan Hill system, Craig being one. Craig, do you want to speak to those? Number one, what a special place Jordan Hill College was, and there was many of you come through the system, and what grounding that gave you.
Yes, I could get a team with maybe 7 or 8 substitutes, all top players, professional players who went through Jordan Hill. Yeah. And the earliest one I remember was a guy called Graham Leggett. And Bobby will remember he played for Aberdeen.
Yep.
And he went over to Canada, didn't he? And Graham Leggett came as a student. I was a pupil in Hamilton at the school, and we got a student PE teacher, and it was a guy called Graham Leggett. And when Aberdeen came anywhere to the west of Scotland, all the boys in the school team at Hamilton Academy went to watch. They didn't go to watch Aberdeen. They went to watch Graham Leggett because he was the student they all loved when he was becoming a PE teacher. But, you could get a team quite comfortably from the number of players that were at Jordan. But the one I remember most of all was Leggett. But then on a Wednesday at the college, when we were students there, Bobby was there, we would have a team. The professionals would play against the college team, and Bobby was in the goal for the pro team. And we had guys like Big Roger Hine kicking lumps out the opposition for the college team. So there was a great camaraderie amongst the students there. And the professional players had a kind of, I think they had a respect from the others. And of course, we could always manage to beat the college amateur team, which won the Scottish Amateur Cup. Guys like Frank Coulston in that team.
Yeah,
so it was a I think you'll remember, Bobby, better than I do. It was a time of very, very good harmony and very, very good the standards of the standard of play in the college was excellent.
They played in the combined reserve league, Craig. They played in that. They played in the combined reserve league.
Combined reserve league, yeah.
College team.
That was a third team of the professional teams played in that league, and they played very well in that league. They won the Scottish Amateur Cup one year when Frank was in the team. So that was the standard. But I'm trying to think of the pro players. I'm going through them. We had Ian Munro was a student there.
Davy Whiteford was
the Whiteford brothers were there, and
both of them. Jim Singler.
John Duncan.
Tommy Duncan, you're going back a bit now.
No, but John Duncan, the big boy that played with Dundee and Spurs. And Tommy Duncan.
Ian Munro, back.
Ian, yes, Minnie. Well, he's with Tommy. Tommy knows Ian well. Yeah.
Well, we had. I'm trying to think of any more, but we had I picked for a local magazine here, and not a local, an English magazine called Backpass. They asked me, how many players came through Jordan Hill. Well, I picked a team and I had 7 subs, and they were all pro players and they were all good standard. And they came.
Was Dave Hilly? Dave Hilly was.
David Hilly went, third ladder to Newcastle.
Yeah. you're remembering them better than I am, but the names come when I come off this this link with you to Canada. I'll remember them then, but you've hit a good number, and that was the standard that was there. And Bobby, of course, was I can't think of any other goalkeeper that was there. Bobby Brown.
If there wasn't
Bobby Brown.
Well, yes, beforehand. That's an interesting one, Bobby Brown. I heard him speak. He passed away not so long ago, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And they asked him about the team that beat England at Wembley. And I thought his answer was brilliant. He says, that was my first game with the Scottish team. And if you remember, Jim McCallaghan scored. And the others, Bobby Lennox scored, and Dennis Law, and beat England, the world champions, 3-2. And he said, why did you pick Ronnie Simpson in goal? His answer was brilliant. He said, because he's a very nice guy. And the interviewer said to him, Bobby, but surely you were thinking you would pick a good goalkeeper, not just a nice guy. But he says, everything else being equal, he was my ball boy when I was the Queen's Park goalkeeper. And he said, I always thanked the ball boy. I found his name. What's your name, son? Even home games or away games. Well, at Hampden, I knew it was the same boy every game, but what's your name, Ronnie? Thanks very much. So he said, every time the ball went past and he gave me it, I said, thanks, Ronnie. And he thanked me for thanking him. He said, thanks for thanking me, Mr. Brown. Thanks for thanking me, Mr. Brown. He called me Mr. Brown. He said, now that was my ball boy. And I went to Rangers from Queen's Park. And who got in the goal for Queen's Park? Ronnie Simpson. And then when he was progressing in the game and he was playing for Celtic, I think it was, at the start of his career, I was looking for a goalkeeper for my national team. And I remembered how polite that boy was. And I thought, that's quite a lovely story to think that Ronnie Simpson was picked because he was very courteous to the goalkeeper who thanked him. And I used to say to the players, be polite to the referee, thank the ball boys. And I want to see it. If the ball boy gives you the ball and you don't acknowledge it, you're not doing it properly. If he's too far away or there's a big crowd and you can't hear him saying thank you, give him a nod of the head and a gesture to show that you appreciate it. Also, if the referee's going to book you, be polite to him. And you'll like this one, a Clyde one, Bobby, because we had a fullback, Joe Philippi from Celtic.
Yeah.
Joe was a bit wild, He was the guy that Celtic signed from Ayr to replace Danny McGrain.
Yeah.
He didn't quite do it. But we got him at Clyde. And a lovely big guy, Joe. And it was not the best time in a tackle. So he whacked, it was actually Ayr United, Johnny Doyle. And the referee called him over and he said, your name? And he says, Joseph Philippi. Well, this referee was struggling, even with Joseph. When I shouted to Joe, spell it. And Joe's so polite, says, Mr. Syme, it's Philippi with 2 P's. And the referee says, well, Mr. Philippi with 2 P's. For you, it's off with 2 F's. So the politeness didn't work that time. I'm sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here, but the Bobby Brown reminded me of that story, and Bobby was another excellent Queen's Park goalkeeper like yourself.
Oh, great days. Great days.
Yeah, I'll tell you another couple of Queen's Sparkles, or not Queen's Sparkles, well, they were Queen's Sparkles at Jordan Hill. Andy Roxburgh, Dougie Houston,
Andy
John Polachek,
yes,
Pete Sweeney. They were all George. Pete Sweeney was at Jordan Hill, John Polachek, and then Andy Roxburgh, Dougie Houston, and so there you go.
Yeah. Yes, well,
just so you know here, Craig, your good friend Colin Miller's on here. He just sent me a text. He says, I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. And he's obviously commenting on and you know, giving compliments on the memory of you two. And he says, I don't know what I had for lunch yesterday. And I'm going to jump on a little bit. Certainly we're pushed for time here. Bobby, I'm just looking at this picture on the right here. I hope you can see that. Can you see that Notre Dame National Championship picture there?
Yes.
And I was actually at that game in a very cold Chester, Philadelphia that night against University of Maryland. And I think when you look back at that, and I always say to people, Bobby, when you look at, you know, Dartmouth, Stanford, Notre Dame, you could hardly pick three better institutions to go and spend your coaching career. And when you look back at your journey and your time in America, you know, give us an insight to your, you know, your thoughts and your reflections now that you're out of it, Bobby.
No, I think the college system, not just for football, for soccer, but I think for all sports, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for youngsters to get an education and really to work at your sport every day. I mean, we were working with our players 6 days a week. You know, it was fantastic. And I mean, and if you get the right, I mean, you're setting them up. It's not, I mean, you obviously want to make them all good footballers. But let's be honest. I mean, I maybe put about 50 kids between the three schools into the MLS, but it's a whole, most of the kids didn't go to the MLS. So you're actually, you're trying to make them better people, and you're setting them up for life. You're using soccer, using sport is the medium to make them better people. And I think that was one of the things that you felt you were doing a good job, doing a really worthwhile job as a college coach. And I really enjoyed that. But you're doing that as a coach. A good coach is doing that. Tommy Wilson will be doing that with all the youngsters at the Philadelphia Union. And you obviously you want to take the good players and you want to pass them on to football. But you know, and I think back to some of the guys that what they've done, you know, that I've had through my hands. I mean, they're fantastic. They've had great jobs. They're lawyers. They're businessmen. I mean, a lot of them are. I mean, one of them, the lads, he was one of the top men in Goldman Sachs. You know, you've got, and then you've got teachers. And the nice thing is, you have some really good players. You know, had big Ryan Nelson had a tremendous career in the English Premier League with Blackburn Rovers, and so that was good. So a lot of them have done that. There's Justin Morrow will be retiring this year from Toronto. Matt Beasler will be, I don't know, he's now the captain at Austin, but he was a captain for a long time at Kansas City. So you look at all these, and there's, I think at Matt Beasler, he was one of the top students at Notre Dame. He was on the pre-med course. He was going to be a doctor, but he was so successful when he went to Kansas City, he's never ever become a doctor. He's, you know, he's now, I don't know, well in his 30s, and he's still playing the MLS. But he was one of the smartest boys I ever had, you know. So, no, I think that was the nice thing. You see them all going on, and you think that their football has helped them, and how you've handled them as footballers has helped them, because they don't all start right away. You know, they don't all go into the team right away. How do they handle the ups and downs? Because you come into college as a freshman, and often you're just 18, and you're playing against boys that are 22 or 23. So they maybe don't have to play. How do they handle that first year? Away from home, usually. A lot of them are sharing a room with somebody that they usually come from homes where they've had a room to themselves. They're sharing a room with someone. They've got studies, new studies, and they're trying to fight their way into a football team, you know? Yeah. So.
And I think that some of your rivalries, Bobby, I actually live 30 minutes away from the University of Maryland. And I remember coming down to games where, you were there with Stanford, you were there with Notre Dame playing against Sasho, and it was a Friday night, 6,000 capacity there, floodlights, and just a phenomenal atmosphere and a phenomenal environment. I'm sure you reflect back on a lot of those great games and great rivalries and, and think back fondly to those experiences, Bobby.
No, we had fantastic games with Sasho, actually, because I remember, I think the first game I played for him was actually coaching Hartford. And then he went from Hartford to Maryland. The next time I saw him was in the semi-final of the NCAAs, and we sneaked by them 1-0. I think we're maybe a wee bit lucky, but we won 1-0 and then lost in the final that year. But I had some great games with Sasha. I don't know. I think that they would maybe end up a bit even. Maybe I remember they knocked us out. The 89th minute, they scored a goal in the NCAAs once. We're playing at their ground, and then I remember another time we won in overtime at their ground. So it's some great games. Sasha, he was a real competitor.
Very much.
One of my football highlights was winning the 3-on-3 tournament at the convention.
The convention.
And Sasha was in my team, or our team, and there was a boy, Steve Swanson.
Oh, yeah.
And Swanee is the head women's coach at the University of Virginia.
Yeah.
And he had played with Sasha, I think, in the indoor football when they had played together.
Yeah.
And I had another boy, John O'Connor, who is my assistant, and he's now up in Castleton State. That's another nice thing. All the guys that you've coached or you had playing for you, or like Brian Weiss actually played for me at Dartmouth.
Yeah.
Then he coached with me at Stanford. He's coaching with, and while he's coaching, he's doing his master's in engineering.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And then, so he graduates as his master's in engineering, and he goes to this job, and he was really a sort of volunteer coach for me for the first couple of years. And he's now working in an office, and my assistant at that time, a boy, Jeff Wheeler, goes to be the head coach at Wesleyan.
Yeah.
And I get this phone call from Big Weiss, and he says, I saw Jeff left. He says, would you consider me for the assistant's job? I says, I would. I says, but do you know how much money you're going to be earning? You'll be earning an awful lot more as an engineer. And he said to me, he says, any bridge I ever designed, he says, I wouldn't want to drive over. He says, I think I'd be a better coach than I would be an engineer. So Big Brian came and was a full-time coach, and then he came to Notre Dame as a full-time coach, and obviously he left and went to be the head coach at Georgetown. He's done a fantastic job. So,
and they're now number one in the country.
Yeah, no, they're number one, and Jamie, my son, is number two.
Yeah, and who's number two?
And they're both best pals. So they're 1 and 2, and they're both best. They talk to each other fairly regularly. So
and Jamie had a big win. Jamie had a big win last night.
Yeah, they beat Stanford. That's where Jamie went to school. He was at Stanford. Yeah. So he was. So no, that's. Jamie's got a good team this year. I was telling you, he was thinking of taking them. It's a pity he couldn't have taken that team over this year, because they're.
Yeah.
He's got some very, very good players. I think I like watching them.
And I think what you touched on there as well, Bobby, is you've taken that upon yourself to be a mentor throughout your coaching career. When you've just touched on some of them, but there's throughout the NCAA world and even in MLS Academy, and you look at the people that you brought on your journey with you, and I'm sure that gives you a lot of pride as you look back to. The Brian Weiss, for example, but there's so many of them, and even your own kids, and what they're doing within the game. I'm sure that gives you a lot of pride as you reflect back on that part of your journey too.
No, that's the biggest thing. You look back where all the players are. I mean, actually, one of the sort of head guys, he puts a lot of money into the Philadelphia Union with you, Tommy, is Richie Graham.
Yeah, Richie, yeah.
And Richie was one of my players at Dartmouth, and Richie Richie was a good player. I used to describe, he was a striker and he had blonde hair, you know, and I described his style. It was like when I would open my door, I had a golden retriever and it would go out into the back garden and just run around. You know, when you let him out, he'd just run around in circles. I said, Richie, you're like Brandon. That was my dog's name. I said, you remind me of Brandon. When I let you loose, I put him on as a sub. But Richie was a great cat. He was actually a very good player, very good athlete, unbelievably good. Tremendous skier, by the way, Tommy. When he came to Dartmouth, still a good skier. Very, very good athlete. He was in the ski team. And, you know, Dartmouth would put a lot of guys into the US national team at that time, skiing. And Richie was a skier and a good footballer, actually. He and the wee boy, Danny Sanker, a wee Canadian, the two of them. And Richie was number 9 and Danny was number 11. And I used to start my weaker, because in America, you can bring folk on and off, Craig. So I would start my 2 weaker strikers. And about 20 minutes into the game, I would bring on, because the fire had gone out the game, I always felt. And there was always a bit more space. So I would put Richie and Danny on. And one was 9 and one was 11. And they both came up with dial 911, you know. When you need help, you dial 911 in America, Craig. So that was, they used to shout, you need help, 911. They'd be looking along the bench at me, you know. They were both a couple of comedians, you know. But no, that was fun because they are young boys, and you're very impressionable, I think, when you're working with boys between 18 and 21. You know, it was like us at Jordan Hill, you know, and you came under great. I mean, well, Craig's dad ran the whole show, and he was one of the funniest lecturers ever. He would take all the senior class for a once a week lecture, and it was most entertaining. But a lot of, did he ever tell you about the Perzel team, Craig?
No, don't know.
He never told you that story. Well, I'll tell you this story. It's a beauty. He said, well, the first compliment I ever got was when I was coaching and my team were playing. It was in a cup final at a juniors, whatever school he was at as his first school. It was a junior team, and they ran out. And he says, there's a couple of wee boys watching the teams run out. And he says, here comes the fucking Perzel team. Because they were, excuse the language, but they were, and he gave me the 2 barrels, you know, but they were white. He says, that's the first compliment, because my team, I made sure my team was well dressed. And what he was really telling us, your standards, you know, that your team should come out with good standards. And he said that was one of the first compliments I thought. My team came out and they were called, here come the, because, you know, they used to be the 2 teams, the 2 boys going to the Perzel adverts. One was a darker white, and the Perzel boy was a white, you know. So yeah, that was Bomber Brown. That was Hugh Brown. But there was, I mean, Roy Small was another, from a soccer point of view, was fantastic. And Roy was in charge of the coaching, the SFA coaching at that time. Yeah. And actually, when I sat my A license, it was Craig was my man. So Craig was my tutor, my mentor. So, and a very good one at that. I would say a very, very good one at that.
Great.
So
great memories. Just to wrap us up here a little bit here, Bobby. Notre Dame, obviously a special place, a special institution. You know, give us your memories of that journey. Obviously culminating with a national title and you know, your journey there. That seemed to be, you know, you'd gone from Dartmouth then to Stanford, and then, you know, finished up at Notre Dame. I'm sure that was, you know, an unbelievable experience, your time there.
All 3 were fun because all 3 had been down. I mean, Dartmouth had never, you know, they'd never won an NCAA game. Stanford, believe it or not, back then had never won an NCAA game. Yeah. And they all had losing seasons. So it was, maybe that's an easy way to go into it. You know, when you're going into a losing program. And Notre Dame was the same. They hadn't had a winning team for about maybe 2 or 3 years, and it was building it. But I think I loved I did enjoy building teams. I think that was always a fun way. And Notre Dame's a special place. You know, and you just saw it growing throughout the 17 years. And one of the nicest things now is the head coach there was also played for me, boy Chad Riley. Chad played for me, and then he was my assistant for 6 years. Then he went to Dartmouth and had a very successful career at Dartmouth. He was there for 5 years. In his last 4 years, he won the league each of the years. And Chad's now the head coach. So that's what I say. That's the thing that I think back on all the boys that came in and did well. And I still, I mean, that's one of the things that keeps me busy just now, because Chad will send me the Notre Dame games, and I get all Jamie's games, from Washington, the Washington Huskies. So then my daughter, because my daughter's coaching at Claremont McKenna, which is a Division III school down in LA, so I get all her games. And her assistant is a lad called Matembe in Lovu. Do you remember Matembe, Tommy?
I do. I remember Matembe. He played there occasionally for us, did he not? In the five-a-side games.
Yeah, he was a very good. But yes, he would. Matembe was very. He's a Zimbabwe boy, and very, very good player. Played for Zimbabwe. Went back after Dartmouth and played for Zimbabwe. And actually coached Highlanders, the team that I coached. In fact, it was the last time Highlanders won the league. Matembe was their head coach. Anyway, he's back in the States. He's married to an American lady, and he's helping Jen coach. He was helping Jeff Cook last year. He was helping Jeff Cook at Penn State. Last year. Jeff runs a terrific program, and he knows Tommy. He was with Tommy down at the Philadelphia Union.
Yeah.
So no, it's just all memory. It's all about people.
Of course,
I think that's the great thing about sports, and the number of people that I've met, number of people, and there's very few people in the game that I haven't enjoyed. So. Yeah.
And it brings you up to these days now, just to finish up here, Bobby. I'm sure, being back in Lossiemouth, getting your handicap down to scratch, getting what an honour, getting your name attached.
I'll have to show you that there it is. Can you see it?
I love it. Look at that. Is that Lossiemouth Golf Course, Bobby?
I just walk out the door and I'm on it.
Jeez, what a great setup there.
So it's tough. Life's tough just now.
That is great. But what an honour as well, getting your name attached to the new training ground at Aberdeen, Bobby.
Yeah, that was very nice. It's always nice. I actually, believe it or not, I wanted it to be called the BLT, and I said this to them, but they wouldn't go for it because I felt when the youth program started, there was me, and there was Lenny was really the head of it.
Yeah.
And then there was Teddy Scott was the mentor behind it. He was the old man that handled everything, and Teddy could put you in your place very easily if you thought you knew too much. Teddy would just cut you back down to size. But those younger boys, we always thought we could solve everything in soccer. Teddy would bring you back down to earth. And I thought it could be the Bobby, the Lenny, the Teddy. And I said that. I said, call it the BLT, but it's okay. And one of the nice things that Simi was in charge, and Simi was the head, he was a director, and Simi was the first boy that Lenny and I took through from the youth program to be signed by Aberdeen. It was Billy that signed him at that time.
Yeah.
So that was really nice too. So.
But what an honour. What an honour. And I just want to finish up here. I don't know if anybody has any questions, Bobby, and it was just a pleasure as always catching up with you. We could sit here for hours. It was a pleasure having Craig, a pleasure having Tommy and everybody else that's joined us, even Scott who saw you in your Forest Mechanic performance. It's just a small world that we've got. And as you say, Bobby, this is all about people and the relationships and the experiences, and the journey that you've had is such a special one. So I just want to say a thanks to everybody, and especially to you, Bobby, for giving up your time and being with us today, and just being around people like yourself. We can never get enough of that. Kingy, did you want to ask something? Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add.
No, absolutely. Just to say thank you, Bobby. It's you're in my younger days as a journalist, my dad would always remind me, he used to go to Rangers one week and go to Clyde the next. So he was a massive Clyde fan as well as a big Rangers fan. So it was nice to hear all those Clyde memories. Terrific. Thanks for the time this morning, Bobby. I appreciate it.
I'm glad he got some sanity in his life, being a Clyde man. So.
Great days. Bobby, it's been a pleasure. I know you've...
thanks, Eric. Thank
absolute
you.
Pleasure. I know you've got your son there, and I hope you can enjoy the rest of his visit. And, you know, I know that'll be an enjoyable family time. So absolutely brilliant, Bobby. Really appreciate it. Craig, Tommy, thank you both again. Always brilliant to have you. And thanks to everybody for joining us. Have a great weekend. Oh, I think we might have... Oh, it's Colin Miller. Colin Miller's just... he's just remembered which sandwich you had for his lunch yesterday.
Brilliant, Bobby. Brilliant.
Brilliant. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Bobby.
Absolutely brilliant, Bobby.
Come on, the Billy.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.